welcome Terresa Moses to the virtual stage.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I am trying to share my screen. All right. Is it working?
Not yet.
Okay.
We have to have the wizard help a little bit. Pop in and help us.
Window, maybe? Huh. Okay, I keep hitting share screen, and I'm not sure if it's sharing.
Are you using Chrome?
I am.
Okay.
Do you want me to use another web browser?
That's the one we're supposed to use.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try refreshing my screen maybe, and then see if that works. My screen is not sharing. Let's see if it works when I do window. Ha! It's working, right?
It appears to be working. Yay.
Awesome. All right. So I'm so excited to be here and share space with you all. And I'm very, very excited because I am going to be hosting a panel as I discuss the exhibition that you all kind of heard in my bio. I showed a couple of these pieces actually the last time I did the keynote here at the Design Plus Diversity Conference. And folks were really interested in these. And so you are able to go to umbraexhibit.com if you are interested in seeing the full exhibition, but I'm going to run that through today. So before I begin, I want to start off with a statement of unity that I've crafted for the university that I'm here in Minneapolis. So I'm on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people, seated in the trees of 1837 and 1851. I'm committed to recognizing the complex history of this land by honoring the truth of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together. I acknowledge the fight against the legacy of white supremacy and culture of anti-Black racism, which has led to the murders of Philando Castile, George Floyd, Daunte Wright, Winston Smith, and countless other Black Americans across this country. Black Lives Matter. I stand with the Asian and Asian American and Pacific Islander communities against the rise of xenophobic violence since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I recognize that words are not enough. And I remain committed to the work of eradicating the injustices against all Black, Indigenous, and people of color caused by systemic racism. All right, so before I get into the exhibition, I want to introduce my panelists. So I'm very excited to introduce Renee. Renee is a manager of UX design research and currently leads a team of researchers on enterprise marketing solutions at LinkedIn. An international speaker and HBCU alumna, Renee is always adorned in one of her signature head wraps. In 2020, she launched her podcast, Tech Rap Queen, helping to amplify Black voices in tech design and culture through dynamic conversations that inform and inspire. Thank you so much for being here, Renee. My next panelist is actually our mistress of ceremony, Dian. She is the Senior Deputy Art Director at AARP. She's in her 14th year serving on the board of AIGA's Washington, D.C. chapter and received a Bachelor in Graphic Design and Print Management from Florida A&M University and is also pursuing a fashion marketing degree from Parsons. Thank you for being here, Dian. And then the last panelist today is Jennifer White Johnson. Jen is an Afro-Latina disabled designer, parent, educator, and activist whose visual work explores the intersection of content and caregiving with an emphasis on redesigning ableist visual culture. Jen has previously consulted and collaborated with a number of brands and art spaces across the print and digital, such as Twitter and Converse, and her activist work has been featured in the New York Times, Afropunk, Teen Vogue, and is permanently archived at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Thank you so much for being here, Jen. So what you'll see today is I'm going to be walking through my exhibition. And with the walkthrough, you will see 6 different themes show up that talk specifically about intersectionality and specifically about being Black women. And so I've invited Renee, Diane, and Jen today to talk through some of these themes in a bit more depth. So I'm going to move forward. So in the exhibition, I created these pieces that digital illustrated pieces that speak to the very real experiences of Black women. So this first piece here is underneath, sort of this theme about being standing out in the crowd, right? I was in Duluth when I created this piece, which is a very white city. And so, I felt like I was always being looked at, and I think a lot of Black women can relate to this. This piece here is called Cookie Cutter Becky. And with each piece, I, on top of the exhibition, I have a poem. So this is part of the poem, I Know You See Me. And then the second piece underneath this category, which I'll talk about in just a minute, this one is called Were We Ever Children? This one speaks to adultification bias. Black girls are oftentimes seen as more sexual. We're often seen as more grown than we actually are. And so part of this poem reads, Seeing What You Want in Me. And so these 2 pieces are both in the category of gaze, racial gaze. And so I want to start off the conversation with this first question. In what ways were you expected to show up and or assimilate to whiteness in design education or the design industry? And I'm going to start off with Diane.
Sorry. First of all, thank you for having me. And you know what? It's kind of hard to say. I feel like when it came to, because I work in media and I have been for quite some time, I think that there were always these standards that I and others were asked to look up to. And I can't say necessarily that it was like, I'll just say it was very general, but it was always referring me to individuals who had done it, had produced something great, or that everybody really looked up to, and saw that as like the Bible. And at first, I didn't realize that it was, that it was whiteness that I was being steered towards, and that it was somewhat homogenous. Some of it was very cool, but a lot of it was like steeped in whiteness. And so I think all of my references early on were from that demo. Even in school, it was, I went to historically Black school. I went to Florida A&M, and even then, I was referenced to work that was not Black work, at least in the design arena and design discipline. Not so much my other classes, like my humanities classes and other classes that were non-design related, but anything that was design related, I was looking at brands that were white. I was looking at designers that were white. And I didn't quite realize that until much, much later, when I thought, wait a minute, where are the people who look like me in this industry? And then once I realized that there weren't that many of us, or that there were Black women and Black men that were in the industry, I realized that they weren't maybe in leadership positions. So therefore I wasn't seeing them, but that they were kind of behind the scenes. So I would say that most of the work that I was introduced to was that of white people or whiteness. And it wasn't until later. So.
Yeah. You kind of talked about education, and Jennifer, I know that you also are a design educator, and so I'm wondering if you can kind of shed some light also on this question about assimilating to whiteness, especially in academia.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is awesome. Excuse if there's like a little bit of a lag on my side, so I'll try to speak slowly. Also, for a quick accessibility description of myself for those that are low vision, or I am a Afro Latina, kind of cinnamon skin, Black woman, Afro Puerto Rican, and I have my earbuds on, and my hair is kind of like in this little top frilly curly knot. And then I'm also wearing a t-shirt that says "The future is accessible." So shout out to Sherry for that amazing presentation, and thank you, Teresa, and everyone just for holding space for this chat. In terms of just assimilation, I mean, a lot of times, folks within the administration, especially when it comes to folks of color, there's the notion of aesthetic. And oftentimes,
Mhm.
Just the Black aesthetic, or like the Afro-Caribbean aesthetic, or wherever your truths hail from, that aesthetic is questioned. So
Mhm.
whether it's related to like color choices or vibrancy or eccentricities, like, well, that's not design. Well, why are you designing in this way? And you need to respect the grid. You need to honor the grid, and you need to be able to kind of tokenize the design so that it speaks to this specific community in order to get the respect. So I think that has always been an issue. Like questioning what is like the genuine aesthetic. Um, and realizing that folks from various walks of life have a completely different cultural, you know, presence, and they want to be able to express that presence and that aesthetic, and that in itself shouldn't be questioned. It should be honored. And it should it should come up. So if anything, I try not to necessarily stifle the students, and stifle other designers if they try to bring in like a really unique style and tone, because I feel like you're reclaiming the narrative and making it very true to your existence. So I think that's one of the things that assimilation can often, make or break your overall design, experience, is assimilating to the things that don't honor your overall aesthetic and your vibe. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well said. And I love that you said staying to the grid, because I feel like that is like a huge thing. It's like a metaphor or analogy for like, the design industry, staying to what we've always been doing, which doesn't include Black people, which is interesting. And so,
Mhm.
Renee, I'm wondering if you would like to share a few thoughts on this question. In what ways does assimilation to whiteness show up in either your educational experience or industry?
This is what happens when you have to go after all of these amazing thought leaders in the space, like Diane and Jennifer, because they say it all. And I'm just so honored to be in the midst in the space with all of you, including yourself, Teresa. And iVideo is also lagging, so I'm going to talk slow. So I apologize. Um, yeah, I think for me, my journey into design and to design research was different in that I pivoted very later in my career. And so when I was looking to get into design, everything that I saw, the people that I saw, did not look like me. I didn't have examples that I could follow or at least get inspiration from that, again, looked like me. So everything pointed to going to particular schools that were PWIs, very specific. I too went to an HBCU in my undergrad. So as I was looking to possibly get into grad school or disciplines, it always pointed to certain schools that were, again, great curriculums, and they've had these stellar reputation of producing a certain type of designer or people in the industry. But I was later on in my career, I had children. I couldn't afford to just go back to grad school full time. I needed flexibility, and everything pointed to, again, a certain type of designer or person, a certain type of school that just didn't fit my box. So I had to challenge myself into creating my own pathway and designing my own unique way into the space that didn't look like the cookie cutter whiteness, or what I didn't realize was whiteness, or the homogenous way. of getting into this field, and really started to take the scales off the eyes of people and make people realize that I, as this individual, as the Black woman who went to an HBCU, who had this different career path, had more to offer into this space, that didn't look like, people going through the normal, and I say that in quotes, pathways. So yeah, I had to learn, and it's been the best experience I've had in terms of creating my own path to this space.
And
Yeah.
Renee, I think I'm
I
going to
love.
jump in.
Oh, sure.
What did you say?
No, I was just going to say, I was going to echo what Renee was saying as well. Like I feel like it's it's refreshing now to like see like more leaders coming from HBCUs, either working at HBCUs like Jen does, or even being derived from coming from an HBCU, because it kind of shows that like just because you went to HBCU does not it means that you just because you did not go to a predominantly white institution does not mean that you can't be a designer. And because you didn't go to an art school, you can't be a designer. Like it shows, I think we're here to say, we're living proof that like you can excel and do and be whoever you want and have gone to an HBCU, because you learn a lot. I mean, my background is military, so I know how to assimilate to all things. What was very challenging for me was actually assimilating to, if one can say this, to a HBCU, because it was the first time that I was actually the majority in a space. And that was hard. That was a hard 4 years for me, or at least a hard 2 years for me. And then eventually I got it. But being able to say, like, I went to HBCU, it's Florida A&M. We're not known for graphic design. We're known for a lot of other things. But that, yes, I've ascended, I guess, so to speak, through media, and am now, at one of the largest nonprofits in the country is a huge thing. And I know that people are watching. So I think being cognizant of whiteness, gleaning what you can from being in those spaces, but then also being aware and trying to learn as much as you can about others that look like you, that are in that space or in a slightly different space, is also very helpful. I think the combination of that helps to make you more well-rounded and informed, and also helping to cultivate your own unique style and voice. All of those things are important. So I don't want to, I want to make sure to say that like we'll just echo what everybody's saying, I guess, in the room.
Yes, thank you for adding on to that. Renee had said something about like kind of crafting, our own like pathway into stuff, and I think that goes great into the next theme of my exhibition. So this one, I think it's pretty obvious what I'm talking about here. This one's called Lynch by Police, and I'm going to take my cues from the accessibility presentation. So this is an illustration of a tree, and on it is hanging a pair of handcuffs, and it's specifically talking about, police brutality. And the poem that goes with this piece, the piece of the poem that goes with this piece is called Killing Me Brutally. And then this next piece here is called Sacred Sexism. It's kind of, I don't know if I want to say attack, but I think it is. It's an attack on religious institutions and the way in which they can try to control Black women specifically, control voices, control the way that we dress, the way that we appear, and the way that we are in society. And the part of the poem that goes with this piece is saying policing my body. And in the illustration itself is a Black woman who is sort of wearing a dress that is made out of, that looks like a church, but then also a cage. And so this theme is called control. And so I want to pull back that line that Renee said about, kind of crafting our own pathways. And I think that when we try to do that, especially if we are the first ones to do that, the industry or academia or wherever we're at tries to control us. And so this question says, in what ways does the design industry or academia try to control who you are as a Black woman? And I'm going to start with Renee on this question.
Where is the time? I think it goes back to when we talked about, Diane was mentioning this, with those or I'm sorry, Jennifer was mentioning the grids, and we think about design principles and the canon in designs, the books that people lean into. They're usually written by white men, or people we look at in terms of the industry, and everyone just looks at them as the pillars, right? And it's a certain way. In walks in someone with a head wrap, red lipstick, big earrings, very expression, very, loud and proud of my Jamaican heritage. And, it's disruptive, but I mean disruptive in a good way. It's something that it's not usually seen. And it makes people have to adjust their seats. And I love it. I love when people have to adjust their seats, because it's shaking them a little bit. And so there's a lot of spaces that I have to go into where I'm coming in and I'm not only the first Black person, the first Black woman, but I look as something that they've never seen before. And so, um, it's one of those things where I have always part of my personality is just not trying to confine and and assimilate too much, because I know I'm going to lose myself. And if I lose myself, then I'm not going to be able to do my best work. And so I'm very adamant about making sure my voice is centered. The people who are marginalized voices are centered. Um, I think Jennifer was talking about, a lot of times the people who are not thought about in design don't get designed for. And so that's why we get these design aesthetics that don't look like the cultures and the people, because they're not top of mind. And so it's always coming into spaces to say, you are not thinking about these particular people, these particular cultures, and really disrupting it in the best way possible. Again, even way stepping into the room and being my authentic self, and making sure that I can break free in all my Black womanness.
Yes, yes, awesome. And I think that's a good segue into Jennifer, if you have anything to add to this question here.
Yes, beautiful. I mean, everything that has been said already, and then I always feel like, certain spaces try to control like our worth and our value. They well, her opinion really isn't worth as much as this person's opinion, because of the degrees and because of the pedigree, and because of the bureaucracy that exists so much in academia, especially when you're in a room of a lot of older faculty, or maybe quote unquote more seasoned faculty or seasoned designers. They will just bypass your value and how much you
Mhm.
can contribute, and they don't really hold space or give you room to to practice, what that value holds and what that worth means. And so often it's the students that end up advocating, because you're with them on a different level.
Mhm.
They see you, they vibe with you. And that is, to me, that's like the worth and the value that I hold in my students' opinion means so much more than just always the faculty, because the students and those up and coming designers are who I'm trying to penetrate. And they're not necessarily trying to control my thought process. Like, we want to design together, and we want to experience just academia and activism and justice together in one
Mhm.
singular space, or one collective space. And then spaces sometimes try to control your accommodations and the boundaries that you try to set for yourself. It's like, well, I don't necessarily have to be like on these committees, or on these, attend like 50 million meetings to talk about the exact same thing, when I
Mhm.
just want to be like working with the students. I want to be out in the community. I want to be not in the classroom. And even just within the pandemic, like, folks realized that they couldn't control like our space anymore. Like, we were out of control, and so
Mhm.
it really gave us a lot of
Mhm.
agency. It gave us so much agency to, okay, well, what does this space mean? How can we control it? How can we be more flexible to make it accommodating for what for this adjusted learning style? So yeah, so I mean, like, similar to what Renee was saying, it's like you can't necessarily control what is boundless, what is limitless, and I think that in the minute that folks try to control like our space or our accommodations, that's when we really have to understand, okay, well, what does true agency look like, and how are we going to put that into practice every day?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, those are some great words, and I love the fact that you said "out of control," because I think society, especially in this country, is really realizing that, like, you need to let us be free. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next theme. But Diane, I want you to start off this question that's coming up. So this theme is specifically talking about, if you do, take, let us have the control that we'd like. We try to save our communities as Black women. Oftentimes we have a lot more weight on us. And so this illustration here is called Help Me Help You. And the Black woman is made into a life vest. And you see a white man here that the life vest is on. And so it's kind of just pointing out that, critiquing, how society uses Black women to save, all of our people. Like, and whenever Black women are doing something like, say, Black Lives Matter, I think that there's like a, well, what about this race, or what about this part of oppression? And so I think Black women are often used as these like life jackets to save everybody. And then this next piece underneath this theme of savior is called "I'm Not Sorry for My Blackness." And so I think in the midst of us trying to actually advocate for our people, there is this thing called white fragility and white tears that are often going to be combated, especially because we have that sort of not critique, the stereotype of being like this angry Black woman, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so this one's called "I'm Not Sorry for My Blackness." And so this question underneath this theme of savior is, in what ways have you experienced cultural taxation due to the effects of white mediocrity, fragility, and tears? And I'm going to start with Diane on this question.
Oh, can I just first say, most of the time I'm tired. I'm still tired from like all the things that you just illuminated there. I would say the first thing is probably code switching, which I've like dialed back significantly, because I think that happens to a lot of people and underrepresented, a lot of Black and brown people. We code switch when we're in these spaces so that we can navigate seamlessly or easily, and we're not being our true selves. And it's very unfortunate because it takes a toll. You're constantly performing. And it's become exhausting, and people need to see us, for who we are and the value that we bring. So the code switching has been one thing that's been very taxing on me personally, and therefore I've stopped doing it. The mediocrity, just like dealing with people who are mediocre. I know that, like, there's standards. We all know that there are standards. We're all they're always referencing the grid system and other individuals of particular practices. And so, but yet, even though they're referencing these spaces or these disciplines or these individuals, they're also okay with the mediocrity of individuals who don't look like me, if that makes sense. So where I'm asked to like go above and beyond to be this superstar, to do all the things, I's dotted, T's crossed, you have this subset of people who are just mediocre. And I find that that's very taxing, right? That like they're not living up to my standards or the standards of the organization, whatever that organization might be. I'm not necessarily speaking about AARP, but other organizations that I've been affiliated with, and other teams. It's exhausting to constantly, try to strive for the best, to be the best, and to deliver when I'm surrounded by or in a space with, those that are somewhat mediocre, that are getting by, but not raising to the occasion. That, like I said, is taxing for me. And then the other thing is, well, I'll just leave it at that, and I'll let somebody else speak, because I'm getting ready to go in, and I realize like I need to dial back.
No, and if we had more time, of course, I definitely want. Like, I'm sitting here on the edge of my seat, and so Renee, I wonder if you have anything you want to add to this question about cultural taxation and the ways in which mediocrity, fragility, and white tears have affected, how you work in spaces.
Yeah, I would say really quickly early on in my career when I was, unsure and, a little bit maybe just unsure. I was a little bit unsure about, where I was in my design career because I'd be in spaces with people who had these accolades and were, accomplished. And, I would come up with these ideas and things, and people would literally take and lift my ideas or information and,
Mm,
pass them off of their own. And I would just kind of shrug my shoulders like, well, that's what happens. But I would see them, pass me and, in all their career achievements and things like that. And I'm just like, but they're doing it off of my sweat and tears, my ideas. And so
mm,
I finally was just like, no, we're not doing this anymore because, their paychecks are growing and mine's still staying the same. And it's
yes.
and it's because of my ideas, my work. And I was like, we're not doing this anymore. I literally had to have a come to Jesus moment, self-reflection. I'm just like, you're taking money and opportunities out of your children's mouth. You are not setting up the
Mm,
next person up for success. How are you setting examples for other Black women who come into these spaces? And so I really just sat down and said, we're not going to do this no more. And so I started to make sure that I would challenge with confidence people who would lift my ideas and say, let's just make sure that you give credit where credit's due. Let's make sure that that person realizes who was the one who initiated or crafted this and put my name and respect on my name in those spaces. And I
absolutely.
called out that need, and it just changed the way that I was seen in spaces. And Shelley said something earlier, and I was just like, this is just the most profound thing in that leadership is not about titles, leadership is about action. And
Mm.
I was like, I was taking action, but leaving it up to people with titles to execute it for me. And I was like, absolutely not. We're not doing this. And it changed the way that I was able to move and excel in spaces when I heard my own voice and used my own voice.
Mm, thank you so much for that. That's like some words of wisdom that I wish I had learned and heard, back when I first started my career as well. Jennifer, I'm gonna start you off in this next section here, especially because you are a caregiver, and that is such a huge part of the work that you do. This piece was probably this was my first piece that I created in the Umbra exhibition. This one's called Trigger Warning. I was tackling that issue about the rate in which Black women are dying in hospitals when they give birth. We are 3 to 4 times more likely to die just because doctors do not believe us when we say we're in pain. And so this piece here is an illustration of a pregnant woman, silhouette of her, and she has sort of a grenade, and then there is a white hand pulling the pin. So not only am I tackling, in the making of this piece, tackling that issue, but also the trauma that continues to be birthed generationally through us. So this one's called Trigger Warning, and the part of the poem that's in this piece is pulling the pin to my trauma. And then this piece, which I think is very self-evident, it is 3 middle fingers. It is called Don't Tell Me to Calm Down. And I feel like a lot of people have probably actually understand what I'm saying when you're in an argument and people are like, don't, calm down. It just makes it even worse, right? And so Don't Tell Me to Calm Down. And the part of the poem that's in this piece is wondering why I'm so mad. So Jennifer, I want to start off with you. This theme is called Danger/anger. And so in what ways is the design industry or academia weaponized against you as a Black woman? And you can honestly just answer what maybe you pissed about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really heavy question. And I feel like sometimes a Black woman's body is forced to become like this weapon of justice, of
Mm,
radical ideals. And it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because then we're always, we're in this space where we're fighting this consistent war. So whether it's within academia or whether it's within like our communities, the war is ours. And that's why, like, I'm here with my fellow comrades, because the revolution is now, and
mhm.
it's always going to exist. And so the question is, am I going to use like my weapon, since there's nothing that is deactivating me from being like this fire? How am I going to use that weapon to activate change? How am I going to use this weapon to basically combat everything that they're trying to steal, that they're trying to take away from me? Which is why I love the name of this panel. It's like, Black women and deserving joy, and how can we use like our bodies as like this transformative space to like enact justice, and to combat injustice. So yeah, so I feel like it's very much rooted in joy and liberation, and making sure that we do that collectively, because we're not in this war. We're not like, we shouldn't feel that we should have to, use our weapons alone. Like, we are a collective body, we are a collective army, that has to reclaim like what this war really is for us. As I said, like, whether we're in like the design community, whether we're just existing, going to the grocery store, what I mean? We're just trying to like, check out, and we have somebody who has an issue. Like, I was at the airport, and literally, like, I'm with my son, and there's like this Karen, with her kid, and I'm thinking, okay, well, the airport's really crowded, and I want to be able to take a seat, and she's just watching me, hoping that she doesn't have to sit in the same section as me. And I'm thinking to myself, look, let me just keep walking with my disabled child. And then she's like, ma'am, do you want to sit here? And I'm thinking, we are in an airport. Like, why are you yelling at me from across the airport? Because you can feel my tension, because you don't necessarily want to be within the same space, or or she's trying to suggest that I'm trying to maybe like steal her space. So really, really complex. When we're talking about something as simple as being like at an airport, where Black women are automatically seen as like this weapon, where we're trying to cause like agitation. So yeah, it's really complex. But yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. That's like some very good examples. I'm going to move on to the next theme here in the interest of time. And then I'm going to skip past this question and go to the last theme, because I feel like the audience would really benefit as we start to begin to talk about liberation. So this theme here is burden, and this piece is called To the Marrow. And it kind of talks about, kind of some of the themes that Jen just talked about, which was like really, Black women are on like kind of the front lines. And so we are going to work to the bone for our people, for our children, for the next generations. And so you see here, it's an illustration of a Black woman, and you kind of see her fighting off like the, white supremacy in a sense, with her fist balled up, but it's a skeleton. And then the part of the poem that's on this piece is called Fighting to the Bone. And then this next piece is called Impossible. It is an illustration of a Black woman who is sort of holding up a broken system. And if you kind of look closely, you'll see like it's kind of outline of the globe. She's holding up this broken system, and then also trying to recreate a brand new system. And so I feel like, as Black women, that's often the position that we're put in, is that like, we want you to do this thing that's underneath white supremacy, but also we want you to think of what liberation looks like, and then at the same time work on that thing. And I don't think we're given those resources to be able to, be successful in that. And so that's why this piece is called Impossible. The phrase, or the part of the poem that's on this piece, is to create a future where I exist. And then I want to move on to the next theme, so that we can have a little bit of discussion at the end of this panel. This piece here is called Freedom Finally. It's just a silhouette of a Black woman. And, hopefully folks will follow Black women to liberation. The line of this poem says, free from the bullshit. And then the last piece here is called IDK TBH, which just stands for I don't know, to be honest, because when I was thinking about liberation, I was like, I don't even know, I can't even conceive like what that looks like. And then the part of the poem that's on this piece is all of it. And it's just a blank canvas. I just painted it, the one that's installed. And so, yeah, I'd love to just kind of open this up. And I'm going to start with Renee here about liberation. So how can we begin to actualize liberation of Black women in the design industry and in design academia?
Yeah, this is, first of all, Teresa, huge shout out to you for these incredible images. I mean, they are
Thank
just
you.
incredible, and I'm speechless when I look at them, and I love to just go back and have them on my walls or things like that. But um, liberation is just so key in, and one, being free within yourself, right? I think that's key, and not waiting for uh, external freedom. Make sure that you are free in your mind, and in your own internal freedom. But I think what's really important in, Black women being able to show up freely in these spaces is a collective of what we all just talked about, right? Being able to have the voices in the room, being able to move things forward, being able to be supported, being able to have the resources. In these last year, we've seen just an uptick of everyone being more aware of social justice,
Mhm.
and there
Mhm.
have been many, many, many monies and dollars flooding. And we need to make sure that the right people are getting those resources, the people who have been on the
Yes.
front lines when it
Mhm.
wasn't popular, when it didn't have a name, it didn't have a certificate, it didn't have a degree, like all
Mhm.
the things. So the people who have been doing this work, making sure that when they're getting recognized and supported, and most likely those are Black women who have been doing this, and making sure they're getting those spaces, but making sure also that people are taking true inventory of the organizations, the companies, the teams, the design structures, and saying, where have we done wrong? Um, if you're looking at your organization and there are no Black women in leadership, there are no Black women, at the
Mhm.
table, that's a problem. And
Mhm.
I know we talk about people building their own table, and we want to support people building at those own table, but I'm also really mindful of getting people, us in the room at the right table, and also shaking that table and listening to the people who are shaking those tables.
Yes, awesome. Diane, I want to hear from you about this concept of liberation. Like, how does it begin to be actualized here in the design industry?
I'll be brief. Amplify, promote, support, pay, and listen. Those 5 things. Like, I feel like all of them are important, and everybody could do their part to amplify somebody they know, a Black woman that they know, in a design space, because design is very broad. As far as promoting, whether it's in a workplace or in a workplace, outside of a workplace, even just again promoting them in the sense of getting their name out, and sharing that information, very much like amplifying. Supporting, you can support any way. You can support in the form of payment. You can support in the form of volunteering, again, and helping to like amplify, to pass their name or their goods along. And then listening is huge to me, and listening goes a long ways across the board, no matter what the issue is. If you're not in that demographic and you can't do anything and you're unsure, just listen to those individuals,
Mhm.
listen to Black women, and then
Mhm.
do one of those other take one of those other action items and one of those other verbs and put them to use. So if you can't do anything at the moment financially, and you claim to not know that many Black women designers, then just like listen and research. Actually, should also have said research, because that's huge too. But doing all of those things, I think, will help liberate Black women. And I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. So we are at time. So Jen, I don't know if you want to throw in like a sentence or two about liberation. I know you have so much work on this intersectionality piece, and so I wanted to, like, if you can give us a couple of sentences to close this out, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean everything that Renee and Diane just spoke on, and don't let anyone compromise that freedom. Don't let anyone
Mhm.
compromise what that joy and freedom and liberation looks for you. What that looks like for you.
Mhm.
Your act of liberatory, collective liberatory experience might be different from someone else's. And don't feel like you have to compromise it, and don't feel like, oh, because it's not the same, that it's not just as worthy, and that it's not just as hopeful. So yeah, so support us, share what we do, and don't and remember that you're not alone. You don't have to do this by yourself. That is the big, huge thing. I feel like, we as Black women, we're often siloed and we're kind of othered in a lot of our spaces. And it takes spaces like this to remind us that we're not alone and that we exist together as this really beautiful unit. And it's not going away.
Awesome. That was beautiful. Thank you all so much for sharing space with me today and going through these themes in the show. Umbra, again, if you would like to see the show, dive into it, feel free to go to umbraexhibit.com where you can see the full show again. Thank you all so much. And that's all I have today.